My mom was a single mother of 3 back in the early 2000s, when she eventually started going on dates when I was around the age of 6. I can still remember the first time that I met him. He made me feel uncomfortable, but my mom shrugged it off because I was a rather shy kid. She had done her due diligence, Googled this man's name, coming across a single court case of him versus the state. It listed him as a convicted felon for murder from back in the early 1980s. I don't know how, but he convinced her that it was all a mistake. I guess because he had a very generic name. She ended up believing him. We were raised by this man, ended up calling him Dad, even at one point asking him to adopt us. The adoption never happened, thank goodness. He was a good dad to us, at least at first. Things started to get weird when I turned 12. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to have sleepovers, wasn't allowed to choose my own haircuts, certainly wasn't allowed to watch TV. This eventually escalated to padlocks on the fridge and pantry, having to ask for permission to drink water, and never being allowed in the kitchen past 8 p.m. This man was a master manipulator, so at the time we all thought it sucked, but it was normal punishment, despite us not having done a single thing to deserve it. I lost the door to my bedroom for weeks on end, for stupid stuff, like forgetting to do the dishes after dinner. Once when I was 16, I wanted to not go to my brother's soccer game so that I could study, and he went into a blind rage. I think that was the first time that I ever was truly afraid of him. He was a large guy, probably 4 times my weight at the time. I think that was the first time his mask fully slipped off in front of me. He started acting weird, being creepy towards me, once I turned 18. One night as I was sleeping, he came into my room and laid in my bed, telling me just how much he loved me. I was so tired that I didn't have time to think of how creepy it was until much later on. I pushed him out of my room that night and went back to sleep. The next day, while me and my family were gone, he had stayed behind. He trashed my sister's room for no apparent reason. She was only 11 at the time and was particularly upset by this act. He gave her the middle finger, and that's when my mom finally lost it, telling him to pack his stuff up that night. That must have set him off as well because he brandished a gun in our faces, waving it directly at us before taking off in his car. We called the cops, and after they located him on the road and having a tense standoff with him, he was arrested. We found out for fact that he was a murderer when his bond was set at nearly $250,000. He tried once again to lie to my mom, but she must have learned because it didn't work this time. I looked up the specifics of his case, and it was way worse than just a murder. He had beaten someone to death with a metal pipe late at night in a highly populated park. While he had lived in our house for over 12 years at this point, I realized that I didn't know this man, not truly, and neither had my mom. How could she have if she let him stay with us like that? He eventually got out on bond. I have no idea who paid for it, and he tried to come back to the house. I was the only one home at the time, and I had no idea my siblings had not locked the door when they left that day. I was cooking pasta for myself before heading into work when I heard the front door open and shut. I poked my head out of the kitchen towards the front door, and my blood ran cold as he was just standing there. He said something to me, but there's no way that I can remember now what it was. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door behind me, not even bothering to turn the stove off. I pressed my full body weight up against the bathroom door and called my mom as he banged and kicked the outside of the door. An even more chilling element of this is while he's trying to break the door down, he's screaming, asking me why I don't love him anymore. I was so afraid I nearly sent myself into an asthma attack. My mom had a family friend come by and pick me up. When they entered the house, he wasn't there anymore. That was the last time I ever saw him, back in 2017. He'd helped raise me and my siblings for 13 years. He was the closest thing I ever had to a normal dad, which, given everything, is kind of sad when I think about it too much. I can't help but worry that I'll fall back into the same toxic and manipulative relationship as an adult. It's all I knew growing up. Maybe that's why I keep people at a distance now. The reason that I thought about this recently is because some true crime TikToker actually covered the story on the man he murdered all those years back, and I happened to stumble across it. One of the victim's daughters even commented on the post, giving more details about what it was like not being able to grow up with their father. Not because he was absentee or had run off with another family, but because he was taken from this earth. It was odd, thinking that so many of my peers and friends would be able to put two and two together if they had seen the TikTok. I know that I'm a victim in all of this, but I couldn't help but feel shame that I was connected to this man and to the atrocity that he committed. I could end this post with a typical, "let's never meet again," but I know we won't, because the man that I'm alluding to is no longer here. I didn't go to his funeral. Almost nobody did. From what my mom told me, not even his parents were there. The last thing that I want to say is to anybody hearing this to please not give my mom any hate. She was manipulated into believing he was a good man, and we've made peace with her on this particular subject. A lot of things I mentioned happening in my childhood were things she didn't know about until he was already dead. And one more thing, since this is such a popular subreddit, if you think you know who I am based on this story, please keep it to yourself. This story takes place nearly 15 years ago, when I was on summer break, 15 years old. I grew up in a very run-of-the-mill, middle-class neighborhood in San Antonio, Texas. Our house sat on a corner, and the fence around the backyard had horizontal wood beams that almost made an X, as opposed to a vertical fence post that I'm more familiar with. Because of this, there were larger gaps between the beams, and seeing through was fairly easy. Another detail worth noting, our back gate on the side of the house, the one that dumped out onto our street, had been found wide open many mornings that summer, and because of this, my dad had looped some wire through the latch and twisted it like a bread tie in order to keep it engaged and closed, although there were several more times that we would still find it open. In our backyard, there was a large deck and an above-ground pool that the deck was built up to on one end. There was a huge, beautiful oak tree that shaded the deck and the part of the pool closest to our house. So my sister and I would anchor our feet at the farthest edge, closest to the back corner of the fence, and sunbathe in our pool on our floats. This story happened to occur on a Sunday. My grandfather was visiting from out of town, and he and my parents were inside napping. My older sister was gone with her friends, off at somebody else's house, some other pool, and I decided to go float in our backyard. My mom closes the blinds to the back and habitually locks the back door before lying down on the couch to snooze. I'm in the pool for maybe 20 minutes, and I can see that someone is standing on the other side of the fence looking in. Although the sun is shining in my face, so I can't see who it is very well. And while I find it weird, I don't say a thing. I see whoever it is walk off, and I think that that's the end of that. Minutes pass, and I decide to swim around a bit, just in order to cool off, before getting back on my float. This time on my stomach, with my face looking up at the house instead of off towards the fence. It feels like only a minute has passed. And that's when I hear the sound of wood creaking. I turn around, and that's when I see a man halfway over my backyard fence, maybe only 20 feet away from me once he hits the ground. Part of me is in absolute shock, and I know that I froze for a moment before sheer terror and panic took over. I realize this isn't a dream. It's really happening, and I need to get inside of my house now. I felt as though the pool became Olympic-sized, and I couldn't maneuver myself to the edge and climb out fast enough. By the time I make it out of the pool and start running towards my back door, the man has already made his way around the pool and is walking his way up the deck as well. He was maybe in his late 20s, early 30s at most, gaunt thin, and around my height, around 5'9" for context. Once he hopped over the fence, he never broke stride, walking slowly and steadily. His gait would give Michael Myers a run for his money, and he never uttered a word. I get to my back door, and just my luck, my mom has locked it. I begin screaming and hitting the window pane. Let me in! Let me in! At least my mom was right there to unlock it. But at that point, 10 seconds felt like 10 minutes. And by the time my mom opened the door, the man was standing right behind me, equipped with this blank look emanating from his eyes. I'm in tears already. My grandfather is freaking out. All the while, the man is just standing there, looking inside our home. That's when my dad makes it downstairs, and he goes crazy screaming at the man. He pushed him off our deck and told him to get lost. At this point, my mom is on the phone with the police, and the next moment makes this whole thing 10 times creepier. The man gets up from where he lands on our lawn, walks around the house, over to our back gate, the one that had the wire in the latch. He untwisted it and pushed through, looking as if he'd done this many times before, leaving the gate wide open as he walks back across the street and into our neighbor's home. The police arrive a few minutes later, and after being pointed to our neighbor's house, they head inside and retrieve the guy that had just been on our property. Turns out the man had been staying with his sister for the past 8 weeks and was on parole and was recently released from jail on theft and assault charges. He had also broken into several different neighbors' homes and stolen some china and a few of their family photos. He went back to jail, and we never found our back gate open again. I still get chills thinking about this because my sister and I both had our bedrooms downstairs, with our windows facing the backyard. And there's no doubt in my mind that he was coming into our yard and watching us at night. My parents moved out of this home a few years later when I went off to college, but I slept upstairs on a pull-out couch for months after this, and pledged to myself that I will never live on a ground floor again so long as I can help it. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney this last weekend, and I had something happen that I don't think I'll ever shake from my mind. For background, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday. Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. While my Sunday prayer habits have changed in adulthood, I'd say that Courtney and I are close. I've met and hung out with her husband, their friends and family, and would even consider her a dear friend. But after what I'm about to share, I'm not sure if this friendship is meant to continue. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all the stares from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table, started playing something on my phone, when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating arrangement said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and he introduced himself as the groom's friend Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist. while also giving me the impression that he was genuinely interested in me. When the dancing started, they began by playing Brown Eyed Girl, and he asked me to join him on the dance floor. We danced together for most of the night, until at one point he excused himself to go to the bathroom. During that time, I found myself alone at our table once more, but eventually I felt the need to hit the powder room myself. More than just my urge to pee, I felt a little hot and tired. Not sure if it was the open bar or the heavy meal that they fed us, but I wasn't quite 100% at this point. When I came out of the bathroom, I searched for my purse, where I swear I left it, on the back of my chair at the table, but it was nowhere to be found. Given my malaise, I thought that maybe I had just left it in my car, so I venture out to the parking lot and into my car to look for it. I quickly find it on the center console, which again is weird because I really thought I had brought it inside. But whatever, I found it, it's with me now. All good. Head back inside, dance some more, before noticing that Anthony never came back. I asked the groom where his friend had gone, and he said Anthony headed home because he wasn't feeling well. I was a little bummed because I was having a good time hanging out, but I couldn't really blame him. After all, my hotness was beginning to shift to a level of discomfort, and now I found myself a bit nauseous as well. I felt pretty solid that it was time to call it a night. I said bye to Courtney, her now hubby, and again went off to my car. I hit the unlock button as I got close to my 2021 Honda CR-V, what we call a crossover SUV here. I plopped down into the driver's seat, pushed the button to start my car, and glance up into my rearview mirror, just to scope out if I look as under the weather as I'm beginning to feel. But that's when something caught my attention. It looked like something in my trunk had just ducked down as I glanced back. Not sure what I had seen, if anything at all. I turned to look back. No longer looking in the mirror, that's when I could clearly see the outline of a body, of a man, crouched behind my seats. It was Anthony. Instantly, I scream bloody murder and hop out of the car. I start to run back towards the reception, and because I can hear gravel crunching behind me, I can only assume that I'm now being chased. I made it inside, and in a panic, I tell Courtney. She looks absolutely stunned. She gets her husband and another member of his family to walk me back to my car. As we're walking out, he says that he doesn't see Anthony's car anywhere in the lot, so he probably left. Now, had he stopped there, I think I could have been all right. But it was when he asked me, "Are you sure there was someone in your car?" Like, yeah man, I'm sure. It was your friend. I left the event, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it, although it's gone even further in my head. Was I feeling awful not because of a few glasses of champagne and overeating? Could Anthony have done something to me? Had I made it home without noticing him? What was the plan then? Where would it have gone? And what was the potential outcome, knowing that my life would have been in his hands, had I not looked back? Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him, and that she had no idea that he would do that. Her husband has said that he's never been accused of something like this before. Neither of them have spoken to him since, though. I've made a report with the police, but who knows where that will go. This stuff easily crosses the boundary from physical threat to something psychological, because I haven't really left the house since this occurred. The thought that he knows where I'm at, where I live, or will just be waiting for me somewhere, like he was in the back of my car, absolutely persists. I don't know, man. It's really just terrifying to me. Hey guys, if you enjoy our content, be sure to subscribe and follow for more. If you're listening to our podcast, ratings are always appreciated.